Hi everyone, my name is Ryan. I'm actually a senior dietitian from Kutipot Hospital. So our department, Nutrition and Dietetics, we strongly believe in the benefits of actually home cooking, whereby it helps to improve cardiometabolic diseases such as hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, and also obesity as what we're actually seeing quite often in our modern society. So this is actually achieved by a reduction of about 50% of calories, fat, sugar, and salt when we actually do more home healthy cooking. And at the same time, we are actually able to increase the chances of actually incorporating what we call our powerhouse foods, such as your whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, which you don't really get much from outside. So without further ado, let us share with you 2 healthy recipes that you can actually prepare at home, and at the same time, hopefully we can actually spark some joy and interest in terms of healthier home cooking. So for the first recipe that we'll be showcasing will be our chicken oyakodon, which actually means parents and child rice dish. So for the first step that we're going to do is we're going to marinate our chicken. So what we have today is actually our chicken thigh. So if you want to use, let's say, your chicken breast as well, it's okay. But the thing is that for today itself, we're going to use our chicken thigh because it's a little bit more tender in that sense. So having said that, the only downside of actually using your chicken thigh itself, they tend to have quite a fair bit of fats around the chicken meat itself. So one of the things is that for this chicken fats that we have over here, they tend to be actually very high in your saturated fat. And the thing about saturated fat is that it's not really that healthy because it actually causes the rise of your bad cholesterol, which is your LDL, and this is going to cause your risk of actually getting heart diseases, or even for cholesterol wise, it's going to be a very big problem. So as much as possible, we will try to remove as much fat to reduce the amount of saturated fat inside, okay? So after removing all the fat, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to dice up the chicken very, very quickly. So we're going to dice it up into about 1 inch by 1 inch. Okay, once this is done, we're just going to dice it up into smaller pieces. So once this is done, we're going to start with the marination. Okay, so for the marination part itself, so we're going to put all the chicken, diced chicken into our bowl, and we're going to add in our chicken marinade. So for the chicken marinade that we have today, we are going to use vinegar, we're going to use our soya sauce, and also our sugar as well. So for the soya sauce that we actually use for today, we actually use the one that is lower in sodium, which is actually a little bit healthier. So one of the things is that when you actually use your soya sauce, which is actually the healthier, which is lower in sodium, you have to be a little bit careful because a lot of times people will think that, oh, because it's actually healthier, I'm going to use a lot of it. But the thing is that when you actually talk about, using more than what the recipe calls for, it actually kind of actually defeats the purpose of actually using the healthier choice symbol soya sauce, which is lower in sodium. Okay, so for the recipe, what we're going to use is we're going to use 1.5 tablespoons of your soya sauce. And we're going to add in 1.5 tablespoons of your vinegar as well. And then for this one, we're going to use about 3/4 teaspoon of sugar. Okay, so if you look at the dish in that sense, so we actually try to reduce the amount of sodium by using your healthy choice symbol, lower sodium soya sauce. But if you look at the recipe, this is the only seasoning that we will use to actually flavor the food. So what we actually use, we're going to use a little bit more of your natural flavors like your mushrooms, your vegetables to actually bring out the flavor of the dish. Okay, so after this is done, we're just going to mix our marinade and our chicken together, and we're going to marinate it for roughly around 30 minutes. Okay, so if you can try to actually marinate for a little bit longer overnight, then the flavor will actually come out a little bit stronger. So moving on, we're just going to chop our onions and our mushrooms. So we're going to use 1 onion for today. So we're just going to actually slice it quite thinly. Okay, so later on when we actually put it over the rice itself, it will actually cook quite fast. So the thicker it is, it will take a little bit longer to cook. So one of the things is that, when you actually want to reduce the amount of sodium, one of the things is that you can try to use a little bit more herbs and spices. So onion being one of your herbs itself, or your spices, it can actually help to reduce the amount of salt that you use to actually give the food that flavor that you really want. Okay, so after this is cut, what we're going to do is we're going to transfer it over to the bowl over here, and we're just going to cut our mushrooms. So our mushrooms itself, we actually pre-soak them beforehand. So for the mushroom, one of the things is that for the mushroom water, you try not to throw it away. And the main reason is actually because for the mushroom itself, it actually contains the compound called glutamate, which is very similar to your MSG. So one of the things is that the glutamate actually gives the food that umami and also your meaty flavor that you really want. Okay, so for this one itself, later on we're going to use the water to cook the rice. But if let's say if you want to actually use it for, let's say, soup, porridge, okay, or even let's say like your steamed egg as well, it's actually quite possible for you to do so. So we're just going to chop it up very thinly as well, same as your onions. Okay, so besides, let's say, your mushroom, you also have a lot of other food items that do have glutamate. So for instance, let's say like cheese, they also do have glutamate itself. So actually when you eat cheese, it actually does have this meaty flavor. Okay. So today we use about 4 of the mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms. Okay, the last one. And once this is done, we're just going to transfer it back to the bowl itself. So once we are actually finished with cutting our mushrooms, we just have to transfer it back into the bowl, and we're just going to start with assembling the dish in the rice cooker. Okay, so we're going to put this aside, and we're going to bring up our rice cooker. Okay, so for the rice cooker itself, what we're going to do is we're going to add in our rice. So for today, we actually use our mixed rice. And the benefit of actually using your mixed rice itself is actually it's part of your whole grains that actually contains your brown rice that can actually help to, number one, help to actually control your weight management. And number 2, it can help to actually control your diabetes as well. And the main reason is because this, your mixed rice itself, they tend to be very, very high in fiber. So when we talk about fiber itself, it kind of digests a little bit slower in your stomach. So you won't see very big spikes of your sugar level. At the same time, it gets you to feel fuller, faster, and also longer as well. So for today, we actually use our mixed rice. It's actually roughly around 20% of your brown rice and 80% of your white rice. Okay, so for this one itself, if you want to use a complete brown rice, go ahead, that will be very, very good. But for beginners who are trying to actually eat your brown rice, we can actually try with this mixed one instead. Okay, so always remember, in terms of the percentage of your brown rice that you want to substitute with your white rice, it has to be actually roughly around 20%. Anything lesser than that, basically based on your studies, there's really not much benefit to it. Okay, so we're going to add in our mixed rice, and the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add in our mushroom water. So as I mentioned earlier on, this mushroom water is actually very, very high in your glutamate, which is very similar to the MSG. Okay, so it's going to give this dish a very meaty taste that we really want from it. So what we're going to actually use for today, we're going to use actually 1 3/4 cup. So how do you actually know how much water to actually add in when you use your brown rice? Always remember, when we talk about the ratio of your brown rice to water itself, 1 cup of brown rice is equals to 2 cups of water. Whereas for your 1 cup of your white rice, you only use 1 cup of water in that sense. So for this, we're going to use 1 3/4 cup of water, which is actually basically the pre-soaked mushroom water that we have. So later on, what we're going to do is we're going to add in our mushrooms, and also we're going to add in our frozen vegetables as well. So we're going to add in our mushrooms first. So this is the mushroom that we cut earlier on. And we're going to add in our mushrooms. So to make this dish what we call a 1-dish meal. So you have all your vitamins, all your vegetables, all your meat, all your carbohydrate itself. This is what we call a 1-dish meal in that sense. So we're going to add in our frozen vegetables. So one thing about frozen vegetables is that a lot of people will think that, hey, frozen vegetables not really that healthy, correct? Not, don't really have a lot of nutrients to it. But on the contrary itself, right, actually for your frozen vegetables, they tend to be actually having higher amount of nutrients as compared to your fresh counterpart. And the main reason is because all these vegetables, when they actually freeze it itself, okay, once they cut, they freeze it on the spot. So it actually locks in a lot of the nutrients in that sense. So don't have to worry about your frozen vegetables. So just have to remember, right, let's say for your frozen vegetables, one tip is that once you actually take it out from the packaging, from your freezer itself, you don't have to thaw it. You can just add it to your dish and just cook it on the spot, okay? So after adding in your vegetables, what we're going to do is we're going to add in our onions and also our marinated chicken that we actually marinated earlier on. So what we're going to do for now is we're going to add in our onions. We're going to add in half of the portion first, okay? So we're going to add in half of a portion of the onions. So the main reason why we actually do this is that it looks aesthetically a bit nicer if you actually separate them. If you're going to put everything at the bottom, right at the top, you will only see the chicken only. So we're going to add in our onions. We're going to add in half portion first, okay? So once we actually put the onions in, we can add in our chicken. Okay, so the chicken that we actually marinated earlier on is roughly around 30 minutes or so. So we're going to add in our chickens for now, including the sauce as well. So the sauce is the one that's going to give the flavor and a little bit of saltiness to the dish. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier on, we only use one kind of seasoning for this dish, which is your soya sauce, to actually flavor the food in that sense. Okay, so after we add in our marinated chicken, just have to spread it out evenly. And we're going to add in the remaining part of our onions, okay? So after this is done, very simple, we just have to close our rice cooker and just put it to cook, and then it will take roughly around 20 minutes for us to actually have the final product, okay? But before that, what we're going to do is we're going to add in our eggs, beaten eggs later on, and we're going to let it cook for roughly around 5 minutes before we actually serve it into our display bowl. So after we actually cook for about 20 minutes, so the rice cooker has actually indicated that the rice is already cooked. So at this point in time, so what we're going to do is we're going to add in our beaten eggs. So we have 3 eggs in total. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pour it gently over the chicken and onion layer, okay? Okay, so just make sure that after you actually pour in the eggs, you do not want to stir the eggs into the rice itself. If not, you will actually get a fried rice rather than your oyakodon. Okay, so we're going to wait for about 5 minutes. We're just going to keep it at the keep warm function, and later on we will actually have our final dish ready. Okay, so after 5 minutes, we just have to check that the eggs are cooked, and we can transfer it over to our display bowl. Okay, so once it's done, we're just going to garnish it with our spring onion. Okay, so for our second recipe that we'll be showcasing will be our wholemeal wrap 2 ways. So this is something that actually started off with like a TikTok hack itself, and this is something that is very simple and very quick for you to actually produce. Okay, so for the first step that we're going to do is we're going to prepare our protein ingredients. So there will be 2 different kind of protein that we'll be showcasing today. So it will be your eggs and also your tuna. So we're going to prepare the eggs first. Okay, so we're going to teach you how to do your scrambled eggs in the microwave itself. Okay, so over here itself we have 2 eggs, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put the eggs into the microwave to make it into a scrambled eggs. And the reason why we actually use your microwave in that sense is because it's actually considered a healthier cooking method, which doesn't really use any oil at all. Okay, so we're going to show you in a while. So after we actually crack both eggs, we're going to actually beat it up a little bit, and we're going to put it in the microwave for about 45 seconds. Okay, so we're going to beat it up. Okay, after this is done, what we're going to do is we're going to put it in the microwave as we mentioned earlier on, and we're going to microwave it for roughly around 45 seconds, okay? Okay, so one thing about, let's say for your eggs itself, it's actually a very good source of protein, and it's also very easy for you to actually make it as a breakfast option. But the only issue is that for people who actually do have high cholesterol problem, you want to be very careful with the amount of egg yolks that you have in a week. So what we are looking at is that we are aiming for roughly around 4 egg yolks. That will be the maximum amount of egg yolks if you do have high cholesterol problems. Okay, so I think our eggs is ready. So we just have to take it out from the microwave. Just be very careful, the bowl can be quite hot. Okay, so what we're going to do, this is actually the product that actually came out from the microwave. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it up to look a little bit more like our scrambled eggs. Okay, so this one, as I mentioned earlier on in your microwave, really don't have to use any oil at all. Okay, so this one is actually really quite healthy. No oil means the calories actually a lot lesser. Okay, so once this is done, we can leave it aside and we're going to move on to our next protein ingredient, which is our tuna. So for the tuna that we have today is actually your tuna that is soaked in mineral water. So if you see in the market, there's a lot of different kinds of canned tuna, and then they are mainly like, let's say like your mayonnaise or even your chili oil or even your brine. Okay, but the one that we're going to use today is your mineral water, which is lower in your sodium in that sense. Okay, so it will be a little bit healthier as compared to, let's say, the other varieties of your canned tuna out there. Okay, and one thing about, let's say, for your tuna, they are actually very, very high in your omega-3, and omega-3 is actually part of your good fat that can help to lower your cholesterol, especially your triglycerides. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to drain it off. After we drain it off already, what we're going to do is we're going to add in our low-fat yogurt to make it into like a mayonnaise kind of creamy kind of tuna. So we're going to use about 1 tablespoon of your low-fat yogurt. Okay, just 1 tablespoon. But if you are somebody who doesn't really like dairy or even like creamy kind, you can actually add in like chili padi, or you can add in like onion and garlic itself to actually give it a little bit of like a special kick or a spicy kick. So one of the things is that, you know, let's say like if you find that, hey, really got no time, so what you can do is you can also buy your canned tunas, and then you can actually put it into, let's say, like a Tupperware, and you cut your own onion, garlic, chili, and then let's say in the morning, you really got no time, just go to the fridge, just get 2 spoons, put into the bread. That can be a very, very quick breakfast for you already. Okay, so once this is done, we can actually move on to the next step, which is basically to cut our vegetables. Okay, so we're going to leave the spoon over here. We're going to take back our chopping board again. Okay, so for our chopping board itself, what we're going to do is we're going to chop up our vegetables. So for the vegetables that we use today is your lettuce, we're going to have your tomatoes and also your cucumber as well. So the amount of, let's say, tomatoes that we're going to use actually 1 medium tomato, and we're just going to slice it up, okay, into something that you will actually normally see in a lot of the sandwiches out there. Okay, so quite round like that. Okay, so that's how we were saying that, you know, in terms of your mushroom and also your cheese, they do have glutamate. Your tomato is also another food source that is very, very high in glutamate as well. That gives it that meaty and umami flavor. The next one that we have is actually your cucumber. So it really depends on, you know, what is your preference. You can actually cut it, you know, diagonally, you can cut it horizontally, no issues. Because the thing is, when you actually put the vegetables into the wrap itself, you really will not see it at all. So this is really up to your personal preference of how do you want to cut it. Okay, so what we're going to do it, we're going to do it like a half moon shape. Okay. Okay, so once this is done, what we're going to do is we're going to put it back into the bowl, and we're going to move on to our next one, which is our lettuce. So this dish, if you actually look at, let's say, like the wholemeal wrap itself, this is something that is very, very healthy, because what this dish actually does, it actually kind of mimics actually the healthy plate concept, which we're going to show you in a while. So we're going to put it over, we're going to put it over in the bowl itself over here. Okay, we're going to leave the lettuce out of the bowl, and we're just going to put our cucumbers inside. Okay. Okay, so we're going to leave it aside, and we're going to put our lettuce. So we're going to cut our lettuce up as well. And then over here, we're just going to cut the remaining bits. Okay, and we're just going to put it back into the bowl over here. Okay, so now we're going to do the last part, which is to assemble the whole entire dish itself. We're going to actually remove the chopping board, and we're going to have a display board instead. Okay. So this one is a little bit bigger. So what we're going to do is we're just going to wash the knife for a short while. Okay, and then once this is done, what we're going to do is we're going to use our wholemeal wrap. Okay, so for the original recipe, what they actually calls for is a quesadilla wrap itself, which is actually not really very high in fiber. But today itself, we actually use our wholemeal wrap. As I mentioned earlier on, it actually helps with diabetes and also weight management as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut at the middle point itself. We're just going to cut a slit over here. Okay, so basically how we're going to do the wrap later on, we're just going to fold it like that. Really like an angmoh simosa. Okay, so it'll be something like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the first wrap. We're going to use our eggs as the protein. Okay, so over here, let me see. Okay, I'm just going to add in our scrambled eggs first. Okay, Just going to break it up even finer first lah. Then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to add in our mozzarella cheese. Okay, so for this cheese that we use, it's actually more considered like a lower fat version of a cheese as compared to, let's say, like our cheddar cheese or even our American cheese itself lah. So one thing is that when you go for very high fat kind of like these cheeses, they tend to be very high in saturated fat. So number one, calories will be higher. Number two, in terms of, let's say, like the saturated fat that will cause your risk of diabetes or even heart diseases, stroke will be much higher in that sense. Okay, the next thing is what we're going to do is we're going to add in our vegetables. So for our vegetables, we're going to have our tomatoes. So we're going to put like, you know, your ingredients in the 4 different quarters over here lah. Okay, so we have over here. Okay, we put 3 first lah. Then over here, we're just going to put in our lettuce. Okay, and we can see basically this one actually really mimics what we call our healthy plate concept. So what we want you to have is that we want you to have actually about half a plate of vegetables, 1/4 plate of, let's say, your protein, and 1/4 plate of, let's say, like your carbohydrates in that sense. So once all the ingredients are in the quadrants itself, so what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it very, very quickly. We're just going to take 1/4 of it, we just fold it this way. We're going to fold it on the right hand side, and we're going to fold it downwards. Okay, so then this will actually be basically what we call like your wholemeal wrap that you actually eat on the spot. But if you want it to be a little bit hot, what we'll do is we're going to actually do a bit of pan frying, or actually we're going to use a panini like a toaster itself to actually toast it, which we're going to show you in a while lah. So we're going to put this aside first, and we're going to move on to the next one, which is actually your tuna. So for the tuna itself, similarly, we're just going to cut a slit at the middle point downwards, and what we're going to have is we're going to have our tuna. Okay, for this time round, we're going to put in this amount, okay, which is roughly around that 1 tablespoon, or actually about that 1.5 tablespoon of tuna in it. Okay, and then what we're going to have is we're going to have our vegetables. So for our vegetables, instead of actually using our lettuce this time round, what we're going to have is we're going to have our cucumber. Okay. Okay, and then we're going to top up with the remaining with our tomatoes. Okay, so once this is done, similarly, we're just going to fold it to make it look a little bit like our angmoh samosa. Okay, just press it down a little bit. Okay, and then we're going to finish off with this. Okay, so this one looks a little bit more compact than the other one. Okay, so after this, if you want to eat it on the spot, it's okay. But as I mentioned earlier on, if you want something to be a little bit like toasted kind, we can use our panini toaster. We're going to shift this aside, and we're going to bring over our panini toaster over here. Okay. Okay, so once this is on, we can actually put in, let's say, maybe our eggs first lah. Okay, so we're just going to compact it a little bit more, and then we're just going to put it down. Okay, and this will actually take roughly around 5 minutes or about 8 minutes or so until you can actually take it out from the panini toaster. Okay, so once it's out of the panini toaster, it will look something like this. Okay, so we're going to put it on our display board. Okay, and here you have, this is actually our wholemeal wrap 2 ways.